I hope you guys are ready for an absolute offensive masterclass for Thursday Night Football tonight. The Steelers and Mitch Trubisky are taking on the Patriots and Bailey Zappi. There might be 10, maybe even 20 points scored combined between the two teams. We'll get to that in just a bit. Our Week 13 record was 9-4, bringing us to an overall record of 123-70 on the season. So not too bad, but it was unfortunate a couple of QB injuries maybe impacted that, particularly Trevor Lawrence going down on Monday Night Football. That game was great, by the way, so maybe the Thursday night game won't be so bad. But we're at the point now where a quarter of the league is going to play this week without their starting quarterback. I made a list of the notable starting quarterbacks that are injured, and I think I've got them all. Joe Burrow, Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett, Aaron Rodgers, Trevor Lawrence, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson, and Derek Carr right now is a long shot to play this week as well. That would make 9 quarterbacks. It's really interesting, and it kind of begs the question, and I want you guys' input on this. Is it like Tom Brady said? There was a recent interview with him where he said there's a lot of mediocre football. And, you know, is that mediocre football on the part of the QBs? Maybe less fear of being hit, more willing to run. Kenny Pickett's injury last week was a run up the middle, kind of scrambling, trying to get to the goal line. Goes down to the 1, it was an ankle injury, kind of re-aggravated it. And, you know, maybe 20 years ago when Ray Lewis and guys like that were in the middle of the field, a smaller quarterback isn't scrambling up the middle like that and trying to score a touchdown. Maybe it's more mediocrity in the O-line? They already get so many advantages, whether it's, you know, kind of being allowed to hold. You don't get many holding calls on a lot of these guys now. They get that half-second early start on pass blocking snaps, but it was actually the left tackle of the Jags that stepped on Trevor Lawrence's ankle and kind of caused that injury to happen. Maybe it's just, you know, teams practice less and they can only practice so many times, so many padded practices. Maybe guys don't have that same level of readiness anymore. Because, you know, 15, 20 years ago, we had guys like Favre and Eli Manning with these Iron Man streaks. Even Peyton Manning, Phillip Rivers, these guys almost never missed a start. And that's in an era where defenses were able to hit so much more. We had, you know, far later hits. It was a big deal, especially playing Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. After they would let the ball go, just hit them. That was a big part of team strategies. And not only were they able to hit more and later hits, they hit harder. And yet these guys just were Iron Men. And I just, you know, it's really interesting stuff. Curious what you guys think about it. You know, what is causing these injuries? Obviously, we had guys missing time 15, 20 years ago and beyond. But I never remember it being like this with a quarter of the league missing their starting quarterback for significant time. So I think especially with Trevor Lawrence going down on Monday Night Football, and of course Kenny was down on Sunday, Derek Carr got hurt on Sunday, it to me is the story of the league right now, and that's what I wanted to talk about and what I want to get you guys' input on from Week 13. On that note, that was enough Week 13 recap. Let's get into Week 14 and maybe the game of the year. The Patriots visiting the Steelers on Thursday Night Football. As I mentioned, it's going to be Mitch Trubisky versus Bailey Zappi. The one thing you may have noticed, Mac Jones was not on that list of injured quarterbacks. He has been benched about 15 times, it seems like, this year. This matchup really intrigues me because, for one, both of these teams have had relatively inept offenses all year and pretty quality defenses that have kept them in games. The Steelers are 7-5, the Patriots are 2-10. Those defenses keeping them in the game have ended up with very different results. I think the key in this matchup is that the Steelers have not lost 2 games in a row this entire year. Of course, they lost to the then 2-9 Cardinals last week. They've got the 2-10 Patriots coming in, and obviously the Patriots have lost multiple games back-to-back this year. It just seems like it's kind of a lost season for them. But for 20 years of watching the Steelers, and a lot of it was, you know, led by Tom Brady, the Patriots always play the Steelers tough, and I just can't help but think Belichick is going to have something for them this week, especially with Mitch Trubisky starting. Even with that said, though, I think this game is going to end up being something like 13-6, 13-9, somewhere in that area, maybe 10-9. And I'm going to pick the Steelers to win it because they haven't lost back-to-back. they're competing for a wild card spot. The Patriots are competing for maybe the number 1 overall pick. And at home especially, the Steelers got to win this if they want any chance, backup quarterback or not. And don't forget the Patriots are starting their backup as well. Picking the Steelers in this one to kick off an incredible Week 14. Speaking of backup quarterbacks, the Texans are traveling to East Rutherford, New Jersey to take on the Jets and Zach Wilson, who is back at the helm after, I think, a 2-game stint from Tim Boyle, who they have since cut, and they've now signed Brett Rippon for now Zach Wilson's backup. That whole situation has also been a mess. I think, unfortunately for the Jets, it's too little too late whether they win this game or not, which I'm certainly not going to pick them to. Aaron Rodgers coming back, maybe he will for a couple of games, but he's just not going to be able to save them. They're just too far gone at this point, and the AFC is too competitive for those 3 wildcard slots. And CJ Stroud has just looked incredible. I'm definitely picking the Texans to win this game. As good as the Jets defense has been, even with Tank Dell going down, I think CJ Stroud is just going to find enough offense to just outscore the Jets. Zach Wilson coming back, it's probably not great that he sat for a couple of weeks. I don't think they're going to be able to muster very much offense at all. And that's just going to be the difference in this one. On the road, Texans come in, go to 8-5, and really have something to say about going into that playoff picture this week. The Rams, who are currently the 8th seed in the NFC, are traveling to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, and at 6-6. And again, as I mentioned, the current 8th seed in the NFC, they need a win badly to stay in this race. But Baltimore, especially at home, has been an absolute meat grinder. They have really beaten up on a lot of teams. I think outside of the Cleveland loss, they've been just a completely different animal at home. And as I mentioned, the Rams have looked better. Last week, they were able to beat the Browns. That game was a lot closer than it looked. It was a 1-point game midway through the 4th quarter, maybe even late in the 4th quarter. And it ends up kind of looking like a blowout on the score sheet. But I can't see this going well for the Rams. I think the Ravens, while they have kind of maybe sputtered a little bit on offense as of late, their defense has played so well, they're going to give that offense plenty of chances to get things right. And I think they will here. They'll become the first AFC team to get to 10 wins this year and really make a case for the number 1 overall seed, especially with the Chiefs faltering. Moving to the NFC South, we've got the Panthers visiting the Saints. Now, last week the Panthers fired their head coach Frank Reich. Steve Tabor has taken over as interim head coach, and they did look better against the Buccaneers. They actually had a lead in that game, which unfortunately they gave up and lost yet another one. The Saints have lost potentially their starting quarterback for this week. We'll see what happens with Derek Carr. He's trying to play, but as I mentioned, it's a long shot. So I'm going into this expecting it to be Jameis Winston. And actually, I think in a weird way, that may benefit the Saints. For one, it could kind of give that offense a spark. But on the other side of things, he definitely has a just go for it type of approach. And against a Panthers defense that has played pretty well, if they can hit on 1 or 2 of those big plays that Jameis is going to go for, I think that might be enough for them to beat a Panthers offense that has been fairly anemic. Now, the other side of it is, Jameis may throw 2 pick sixes. That could happen. That's the one way where I see the Panthers winning here, but I'm going to err on the side of him making good decisions more than bad decisions, especially at home, and especially with the Saints still very much in it for the 4 seed by winning the NFC South. So, picking the Saints to win this one, close game as most divisional matchups tend to be, but in the end, I just think the Saints are going to muster enough offense to get the win over the 1-win Panthers. In a battle of several of the backup quarterbacks we talked about at the beginning of this video, the Colts are visiting the Bengals, and as recently as last Sunday, I think most of us would have expected this to be a bit of a laugher. The Colts and Gardner Minshew have looked pretty darn good. Gardner is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, and frankly, the way he's been playing, I think he's making a case to maybe start somewhere next year, even if it is as a bridge starter for a rookie quarterback. But Jake Browning, and I think I called him Zach Browning last week, maybe even the week before, he definitely deserves an apology for that because my goodness, what a performance against the Jags. He looked incredible. Now the Jags defense, one place they are vulnerable is against the pass, so maybe they made him look a little bit better than he otherwise would have. But man, it adds some intrigue, especially with the Bengals being at home for this matchup against the Colts. And the Bengals are still in it. As I said, the AFC wildcard race is so tight right now. A bunch of 7-5 teams, but the Bengals are sitting there at 6-6 with a chance at it. I could definitely envision a reality in which the Bengals find themselves above 500 after this week. But I'm going to go with the Colts specifically because of Shane Steichen. I really think what he has done with that offense has been so impressive. I mean, he's got, as I mentioned, Gardner Minshew playing at a really high level. And I think he's going to get a starting job somewhere next year. The other side of it, though, is I think maybe the Bengals and Jake Browning are due for a little bit of a letdown game after such an emotional high beating the Jags like that, albeit with some of the air being taken out of the stadium with Trevor Lawrence's injury. I just kind of think, maybe they fall back down to earth a little bit here, and if they falter just a little bit the way the Colts have been playing, that's going to be enough to give the Colts the edge. Going to pick the Colts on the road to get the win here, go to 8-5. And that wild card race, as I said, it is going to be really interesting down the stretch. Swinging back around to the other two NFC South teams, the Buccaneers are traveling to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Now, I had to look up what the Falcons even did last week. I thought they were on a bye. They beat the Jets, and that game was so forgettable that I completely forgot it even occurred. So, the Buccaneers coming off a win over the Panthers, in which, as I mentioned, they were actually down in that game and had to come back. The Falcons coming off a very low-scoring game against the Jets. Earlier in the year in Tampa, the Falcons were able to get the win 16-13. And again, both of these teams are very much alive for the NFC South crown. The Falcons currently are the division leaders. It's such a tough pick. It's really difficult to beat a team twice in the same year. But the Falcons have that major advantage of that one win already coming on the road. 2 weeks ago, I picked the Falcons to beat the Saints for literally no reason. I just felt like it was going to be one of those games that kind of goes opposite of what would be expected, and the Falcons were able to win that one. I think in this case, I'm going to pick the Falcons to lose this one for no reason, just some sort of Falcons type error. It's going to lead to a Buccaneers win. I think the Bucs take what they were able to get going last week in that win over Carolina and channel it into another divisional win over the Falcons and stake their claim at least towards a shot at the NFC South crown. There's going to be a couple of games every week that maybe don't go as expected. I would like to say the Falcons would be the expected pick here, and I just think something's going to happen that gives the Buccaneers the edge to get to 5-7. So finally we get to the Jaguars. They are heading to Cleveland to take on, I believe it's going to be the Joe Flacco-led Browns. And there is still a chance that Trevor Lawrence plays. He hasn't been rolled out, but I think they're going to sit him here. They probably can afford to drop one here if it were to not go their way. Where they're sitting right now in the AFC South, they only have a one-game lead, but I think if they give Trevor Lawrence some rest, the way the rest of their schedule looks, they should be all right. So I know that's not necessarily the approach teams take. They try to win every game, obviously, but I think they're going to sit Trevor Lawrence down in this one, and I think they're going to win it. Why? We're looking at the head coach that brought Nick Foles to a Super Bowl championship, and obviously Nick Foles played great, not taking anything away from what Foles did, but it takes a special coach, a coach who was a quarterback himself, to have a backup ready to play a New England Patriots team in the Super Bowl that has won so many times and actually get the win. I think Doug Peterson's going to be able to get enough out of CJ Beathard. He doesn't need 30 plus points. He doesn't need 400 plus yards passing. He just needs a few plays here and there. This is going to be a low scoring matchup for sure. And I just think whatever he gets out of CJ Beathard is going to be enough. Maybe ETN goes off. Maybe it's Calvin Ridley. Maybe it's, I think Christian Kirk's out, so maybe Ingram steps up. I don't know what is going to be. But I'm just picking Doug Peterson to do it again with a backup quarterback and get a big win, give Trevor Lawrence that week off, and then make a real run at the #1 seed themselves. We are 15 minutes into this and just finishing up the 1 o'clock slot, so we're going to try to speed this up a little bit. We have the Lions traveling to Chicago to take on the Bears. Remember, before that Thanksgiving Day loss to the Packers, the Lions the prior week had to make a 12-point comeback in the final 4 minutes to beat the Bears at home. Now they're traveling on the road to take on the Bears, and this is a Bears team that has looked much better as of late. I'm really leaning towards picking the Bears. I'm not sure I've picked them to win a single game all year. The problem is this Lions offense can be so explosive they can make a 12-point comeback in the final 4 minutes, but at home, in December, I think this is the last outdoor game the Lions play all year. I think the Bears are going to get the better of them. I think it's going to slow the Lions down a little bit playing in the cold, although I think Sunday is not supposed to be terribly cold, but big difference between playing indoors and outdoors. That slows that offense down just a bit, maybe gives the Bears defense an edge, and I think because of that blown lead a couple of weeks back, they're going to be more prepared for this and more ready for this. I'm picking the Bears, I'm pretty sure for the first time this entire year, maybe the last time. Let's see what happens. Let's see if we can get one right, choosing the Bears. This may help in speeding things along. We have the Seahawks visiting the 49ers for the first game in the mid-afternoon slate, and as much as the Seahawks offense finally seemed to get things going against the Cowboys last week, their defense gave up 40-plus points, and in the end, they weren't able to get the win. Lockett drops that pass that maybe does, put them in position to put the game away, and it just seems like there's always something with the Seahawks right now. Either their offense can't get anything going, which had been the case for several weeks. Last week, their offense plays really well, and their defense lets them down. Taking on a 49ers team that just beat the Eagles by 20-plus points, I'm not sure that either phase is going to look great here. Picking the 49ers, I believe they're the best team in football right now, and I highly doubt I'll pick against them for the rest of the season. So, got the Niners winning this one. We'll get to it. I think there's a chance they end up with the #1 seed by the time it's all said and done. Moving on to the Vikings and Josh Dobbs traveling to Vegas to take on the Raiders. And yes, the Vikings are indeed sticking with Josh Dobbs this week. I think if the Vikings weren't coming off a bye, I probably would go with the Raiders. They have been much improved, though maybe the high of Josh McDaniels getting fired and Antonio Pierce taking over as interim head coach has started to wear off a little bit. But we have seen in recent weeks, Kevin O'Connell is the real deal. A great offensive mind in the league, and as we saw when Josh Dobbs took over for Jaron Hall in his first game with the Vikings, he has that ability to communicate exactly what he needs Dobbs to do and how the plays are going to work. I think with the bye week, with all this time to prepare for a Raiders defense that is good, not great, they're going to have enough answers, and I think they're going to put up another high-scoring outing here. Justin Jefferson is going to be back for the first time. We'll see how he and Josh Dobbs gel, but I'd imagine it's going to be good. It definitely makes a quarterback's job easier having, I think, inarguably the best wide receiver in the league line it up with your team. So I've got the Vikings getting the win on the road here, still making a push for the playoffs. Maybe this sparks things and gets Josh Dobbs back on the right track. We've got an AFC West showdown in Los Angeles this week. The Broncos are traveling to LA to take on the Chargers. I stared at this matchup for a couple of minutes trying to decide what direction to go with it, and I think I'm going to look to last week. The Chargers were only able to put up 6 points of offense against the Patriots defense, which is very good and has held the last, I think, 3 opponents now to under 10 points. So definitely keep that in mind. The Broncos defense isn't as good as the Patriots defense, but they have been playing much, much better since giving up 70 to the Dolphins. I think they're going to be able to keep the Chargers offense in check at least enough to stay competitive. And while Russell Wilson did throw 3 interceptions last week, including an end zone interception to lose it against the Texans, I think they're going to be able to hang around in this one. And I'm going to go with the Broncos to steal a win. Whether it is a last-second field goal, a last-second touchdown pass, maybe a last-second touchdown scramble by Russell Wilson, something in that realm, that's the direction I'm going with this game. I do think the Chargers offense will look better than they did last week, but I think the Broncos defense can kind of hold them in check. I think there'll be some field goals from both sides, but in the end, I think the Broncos, and Sean Payton definitely being the better coach on the two sidelines there, I think they just find a way to get this divisional win. We've got some really good matchups this week. The final matchup in the mid-afternoon slot is the Bills visiting the Chiefs. Both of these teams have had their struggles. The Bills have had struggles while losing more games than we'd expect. They are 6-6. The Chiefs are coming off a loss to the Packers that almost no one saw coming, and now they get the Bills at home. So I was going to pick the Bills in this, looking back to last week and just kind of looking ahead and knowing this matchup was coming up. But I think I'm going to flip here. The Bills have looked actually weirdly kind of good in a lot of their losses, including the Eagles' loss. But the direction I'm going is Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes not losing 2 games in a row. I think if they had beaten the Packers, I would pick the Bills here pretty easily. I mean, the Bills are a desperate football team. I think I may even still need to reconsider that. If they lose this one, they're pretty much done. I mean, mathematically, they're not going to be eliminated, but with all those 7-5 teams in the AFC, at least some of them I think are going to get to 8-5 this week. If they drop to 6-7, it's just going to be nearly impossible to get back in it. Their offense has put up a lot. Can they outscore the Chiefs even with a good Chiefs defense? I don't think they can. I'm going to stick with flipping to the Chiefs and just not seeing Mahomes and Andy Reid lose 2 in a row, even to a good Bills team. Picking the Chiefs at home to get that win in Arrowhead. I can't see them dropping 2 in a row. But boy, that could be a good matchup. If the Bills are desperate and the Chiefs are looking to rebound, I think that last game in that 4:25 Eastern kickoff slot could be awesome to watch. Speaking of awesome to watch, the Eagles are traveling to Dallas to take on the Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. This game could mean a lot regarding the number 1 seed in the NFC. The Cowboys are 9-3. The Eagles are 10-2, coming off a loss to the 49ers in pretty convincing fashion. And I think the Eagles right now are a tired football team. They played a couple of games in the rain. They had that Buffalo Bills game going overtime. I think it was a 59-yard field goal by Jake Elliott even to get it there. But they've played a lot of football. They've played a lot of snaps. And that 49ers team, they out-hit and out-physicaled the Eagles pretty much, I would say, from like the 10-minute mark in the first quarter on. We already know the Cowboys are a different team at home. On that turf, they're faster, their defense flies around, their offense puts up huge numbers. And historically speaking, the Cowboys have played really well at home against the Eagles. I think they've won their last 5 or 6. Now, last year, Jalen Hurts was injured for this game, so maybe cross that one off the list. And even that was a high-scoring game with Gardner Minshew. I'm going to pick the Cowboys here. My one concern, as we get into December football, these fast teams kind of just get slowed down a little bit, but I'm not sure that applies here. I think on the turf indoors here, that Cowboys offense and even the Cowboys defense can fly around and make plays. I got a high-scoring game, maybe like 38-35, 35-31, something like that. But I think the Cowboys are going to get the win. They have a real chance at grabbing that NFC East crown. I don't know that they're going to win it by the end of the season, but I've got them winning this game and shaking up everything in the NFC. Now, either this thing's lying to me, or there are 2 Monday night games that kick off at the exact same time, 8:15 Eastern. We're going to go with it, but if one of them is incorrect, feel free to let me know in the comments. I am not aware of them doing 2 simultaneous kickoff games, like, ever, but maybe that is going to be a thing. Anyway, the Packers are traveling to New Jersey to take on the Giants. The Tommy DeVito-led Giants. By the way, Tyrod Taylor is back from injury. They're sticking with Tommy DeVito, who has looked actually pretty good. turns out when they let him throw the ball, he can make some plays. But the Packers are coming off that huge win over the Chiefs. The momentum, the confidence boost that comes from that is huge. And the Giants defense, I think they're going to rebound a little bit. I think they're going to start to play a little bit better, seeing something out of their offense. But I pick a letdown game for the Packers. I don't think I'm going to. They have played themselves into the NFC playoffs right now. If the playoffs started today, which I know is a dumb thing to say because they don't, they would be the 7th seed. I think as opposed to picking a letdown game for the Packers here, we may be looking back at last week and that victory over the Chiefs as the kind of turning the corner moment for Jordan Love and the Packers of the current age. We had Brett Favre, we had Aaron Rodgers. This is Jordan Love's team now, and I think they're going to get another win here over the Giants on Monday Night Football, I think, assuming this isn't lying to me, and go to 7-6, get above 500, and stay put right there in the thick of things in the NFC. And finally, the Titans are headed to Miami to take on the Dolphins, a Dolphins team that I believe is the only current seeded playoff team that has not lost to a sub-500 opponent, which is interesting because they also haven't beaten like any really good teams. So it's a weird dichotomy going on there, but as I said, we're going to try to speed this along. The Titans have looked better as of late. They played a close game against the Colts. They brought it into overtime. Derrick Henry ended up in the concussion protocol, and they just, at the end of the day, weren't able to get it done. I think this Dolphins team just has too much offensive firepower, especially with the game being in Miami. I just talked about these fast teams in December. They can get kind of slowed down a little bit. Not so much when the games are played in Miami, Florida. So I expect the Dolphins offense to look as advertised, and I just think they're going to outscore the Will Levis-led Titans. He's done some good things. I think they have maybe a chance with him being the future there, but I just think they're not going to be able to muster enough points. Whether it's punts, whether it's turnovers, I think the Dolphins offense gets a couple extra possessions. Tyreek Hill is on pace to break 2,000 yards, and if they do get those additional possessions, he may take a big chunk out of that yet. I've got the Dolphins winning this one, going to 10-3, and remaining as the top seed in the AFC. So, as I mentioned, this video has already been longer than intended. Let's quickly recap our Week 14 picks. I've got the Steelers getting the win over the Patriots tonight on Thursday Night Football. Got the Texans over the Jets. Ravens beating the Rams. Saints over the Panthers. Colts over the Bengals. Got the Buccaneers stealing a win against the Falcons. Jags over the Browns. Bears beating the Lions. 49ers beating the Seahawks. Got the Vikings over the Raiders. Broncos beating the Chargers. Taking the Chiefs to get the win over the Bills. The Cowboys to beat the Eagles. Got the Packers over the Giants. And finally, the Dolphins over the Titans. So, two, I think, really big games this week. Bills, Chiefs, and Cowboys, Eagles. Let me know what you guys think for both those games in the comments below. Who you got winning each of those? As always, thank you for watching. Enjoy the games, and I'll see you next time.